Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, you'll learn the history of China from the Xinhai Revolution up the one-child policy. Toward the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, the Qing Empire had been facing economic troubles and turmoil from within and without. Other more powerful countries were trying to gain influence in the realm. To make matters worse, there were internal uprisings. In October 1911, some revolutionaries, under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen, launched a strike on the Qing stronghold in the city of Wuhan. This sparked the Wuchang Uprising, which led to more revolts in other cities and eventually to the Xinhai Revolution. In 1894, Sun Yat-sen, a revolutionary leader, founded the Revive China Society. This was an underground resistance movement with the main goal of deposing the Qing dynasty and establishing a republic. Then, in 1905, he, along with two others, helped found the Revolutionary Alliance that aimed to unite the different revolutions that had sparked all over China. In an attempt to quell the rebellions, the government appointed Yuan Shikai as prime minister. In December 1911, the city of Nanjing fell to the revolutionaries. There, the rebels formed the Republic of China with Sun Yat-sen from the Kuomintang, KMT party as the provisional president. The empire was not defeated yet. For that, they turned to the prime minister who later forced the emperor to abdicate. With that, the empire finally collapsed, and it marked the beginning of the modern age for China. Amidst all the chaos, Mongolia and Tibet declared independence. On February 12, 1912, Empress Dowager Long Yu signed the abdication form in behalf of the 6-year-old Emperor Pu Yi. This brought an end to the Qing Empire, and nearly 4,000 years of Chinese imperial history ended. The Republic of China was formed with Sun Yat-sen, who had been the leader of the revolution, as provisional president. He was in power until the swearing-in of Yuan Shikai on March 10, 1912. This president attempted to restore the monarchy and was appointed emperor on November 20, 1915. He held that the republic had failed and that a totalitarian rule would be the only way to unify China. However, he faced widespread opposition. Subsequently, several warlords declared their provinces to be independent. After his death, there was great instability with several generals controlling large swaths of territory. These fought against the ruling Kuomintang party and against each other. Thus began the warlord era, a time in which the country was heavily fragmented and weakened by all the internal turmoil. Finally, after many failed attempts, the KMT, under the rule of Sun, successfully established a government in southern China in 1923. They then began a campaign to unite China. To achieve this, they formed an alliance with the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, called the First United Front in 1924 to receive support from the Soviet Union. Another leader of the KMT, Chiang Kai-shek, managed to unify northern China. However, in 1928, the Central Plains War was fought between the defeated warlords and the KMT. This conflict would last until 1930, being the largest of the era. The 1930s saw great belligerency in China since there were 4 factions at odds with each other. These were the Kuomintang, the Chinese Communist Party, remaining warlords, and the Empire of Japan. In 1919, at the Versailles Peace Conference, the German colony in Shandong province was granted to Japan. This angered Chinese students who started protesting in several cities. These protests were collectively called the May 4 movement. They led to the creation of new political ideologies, such as communism. Nationalism was also greatly strengthened. The difference between these ideologies eventually led to the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese Communist Party, CPC, and the Nationalist Party, or Kuomintang, KMT, were formed. These two were at odds with each other, and tensions began flaring up until, in 1927, the Chinese Civil War began. The KMT fought against the CCP over who would rule the government. Initially, the KMT, backed by Western powers, gained the upper hand, driving the CPC into the rural areas. However, the CPC, under Mao Zedong's leadership, shifted to guerrilla warfare and developed a strong base of support among the peasantry. However, when World War II began and Japan initiated a full-scale invasion of China, the two parties settled differences and formed the Second United Front to quell the invasion. Japanese Emperor Hirohito yearned to create a large empire. Japan had initiated an invasion of Manchuria in 1931. This occurred after the Mukden incident, in which some Japanese soldiers destroyed part of a Japanese railway in Manchuria to provoke an invasion. On July 7, 1937, a full-scale invasion of China began. Some of the major battles include the one at Shanghai, with significant losses on both sides, and that of Nanjing, in which atrocities were committed against civilians, causing the death of hundreds of thousands. In the end, Japan had occupied over 25% of Chinese territory. In 1937, the CCP and the KMT settled differences and formed an alliance called Second United Front to counter the invasion. After Japan was defeated in World War II, China regained Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands, which had been conquered back in 1895. After World War II, in 1945, the KMT and the CCP restarted the Chinese Civil War, a conflict that raged until 1949. The CPC's strategy of encircling the cities from the countryside proved to be highly effective. By mobilizing the rural masses and establishing a network of revolutionary bases, the CPC gained momentum and gradually eroded the KMT's control over the country. The turning point in the war came in 1949, when the CPC launched a decisive offensive and captured the nationalist capital, Nanjing. Chiang Kai-shek and his followers were forced to retreat to Taiwan, where they established the Republic of China on December 7, 1949. On October 1, 1949, the People's Republic of China was established under Mao Zedong as the first chairman. On January 1958, Mao promulgated the Great Leap Forward. This was an attempt to turn China from an agrarian society to an industrial powerhouse and into the modern age. This proved disastrous. Since millions of peasants were moved to cities to work in factories, agricultural production diminished, and the largest famine in world history ensued with an estimated 30 million deaths. Tibet, which had gained independence in 1913 after the Xinhai Revolution, was invaded and conquered by the People's Liberation Army. Its annexation became effective on October 7, 1950, when the People's Liberation Army entered Tibet. This marked the beginning of the Chinese government's control over the region, which was formalized with the signing of the 17-Point Agreement in May 1951. Land held by monasteries was seized to be redistributed to the peasants. This led to an uprising led by monks in June 1956, and it lasted to 1959. The PLA began to obliterate entire Tibetan villages. After an attempted abduction, the 14th Dalai Lama, the leader of Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism, fled to India. The First Taiwan Strait Crisis was a minor conflict in which the People's Republic of China, PRC, heavily bombed the Republic of China, Taiwan's held island Kinmen. This occurred in September 1954, and in the next month, the U.S. President Eisenhower signed the Sino-American Mutual Defense Treaty. In this treaty, the United States pledged support to Taiwan in case of invasion. As the bombing intensified, the U.S. made a naval blockade of the PRC, and in March 1955, China agreed to a ceasefire. There have been a total of 3 crises in the Taiwan Strait in 1954, 1958, and 1995. There are diplomatic tensions and minor military confrontations in the present. In 1962, what came to be known as the Sino-Soviet Rift occurred. One of the main reasons that contributed to this separation was the difference in political ideologies. The Soviet Union was based mainly on urban factory workers. Additionally, Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, desired a peaceful coexistence with the West, while China adhered to peasantry and continued revolution. Mao desired to pursue nuclear weapons, which was contrary to his counterpart's policy of détente, which advocated for the reduction of such armament. Additionally, at the Cuban Missile Crisis, Mao viewed Khrushchev's desire to negotiate as weakness. The rift continued until the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. The Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution was launched by Mao in 1966, and it lasted until 1976. This was an effort at curtailing Western and capitalist influence from education and literature. A total of 11 million students from universities formed the Red Guards who were charged with attacking traditionalists and other individuals. They were ordered them to fight against the four olds these were: culture, ideas, habits, and customs. Religious worship was prohibited and temples demolished. Revolts start to pop up in big cities. Shanghai is taken over by the insurrectionists. A directive called the Back to the Countryside movement was issued, and hundreds of thousands of individuals deemed to be capitalists were sent to rural areas to be re-educated. On April 9, 1976, 2 million people descended on Tiananmen Square to protest against the Gang of Four, who had piloted the Cultural Revolution. These four were arrested and tried for treason. After Mao's death, the movement was put to an end. Prior to 1971, there were no diplomatic relations between the United States and China since the communist takeover in 1949. This changed after the 31st World Table Tennis Championship in Nagoya, Japan, in which the U.S. team is invited to China by their counterparts. This event was called by some as the Ping Herd round the world. On April 10, 1972, the American team crossed into China from Hong Kong. This ushered in an era of ping-pong diplomacy in which diplomatic relations were established with the United States. That same year, the U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger held talks in Beijing to pave the way for a visit from U.S. President Richard M. Nixon. In October, Taiwan loses its seat in the United Nations, and it is given to the People's Republic of China. On February 21, 1972, Nixon visits China and meets with Mao and the Premier Zhou Enlai. Nixon's 7-day visit marked an end to over 25 years of no diplomatic relationship. The Shanghai Communique was one of the outcomes of the meeting. In this document, Nixon acknowledged the Taiwan issue and recognized the One China policy that states that there is only one China and that Taiwan is part of it. When Deng Xiaoping became president in December 1978, he ended the Cultural Revolution that was initiated by his predecessor. He undertook the four modernizations: agriculture, economy, national defense, and scientific and technological development. He ambitiously proposed a complete overhaul of the economy. He established the open-door policy, encouraging foreign investments and several exclusive economic zones, such as Shenzhen, inviting non-native businesses. He also introduced capitalist ideals into farming, such as the de-collectivization of land and private ownership. Under his rule, China became one of the largest economies in the world, achieving a GDP growth of 10% a year. The economy is now a socialist market economy. As the Chinese population reached 900 million in 1980, Deng Xiaoping made the one-child policy into law. This prevented parents from having more than one child. Its main goal was to slow the rapid population growth, since the population of 500 million had nearly doubled in 40 years. However, by 2015, there was a problem of an aging population and a shrinking workforce. Consequently, the one-child policy was ended in 2016. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the rest of the history of China.